All right, let's talk about the news. You ever open up your news app or look at the paper and just feel overwhelmed? You see one headline about a state's economy doing great. Next to it, there's something about a new US tariff. Then you see a story about a natural disaster and another about a new government building. It feels completely random, right? A jumble of disconnected events. But what if I told you they weren't random at all? What if they were all pieces of the exact same puzzle? Today, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take all these seemingly separate headlines from a single day in India, and we're going to connect the dots to show you the one single fascinating story that's hiding in plain sight. So, how are we going to piece this puzzle together? Well, here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the economic engine. Follow the money, as they say. Then, we'll zoom out and look at the global chessboard that this economy is playing on. After that, we'll turn inward and see how India is trying to build and reform itself from the inside. And finally, we'll put it all together and connect the dots to see the big picture. Sound good? Let's dive in. Okay, first stop, the economic engine. This is the perfect place to start because the story of the economy on this particular day is just a classic drama. It's a story of incredibly good news, some really high hopes for the future, running smack into a giant, unexpected wall. It's like planning a perfect picnic and then watching a storm cloud roll in out of nowhere. We have headlines, we have headaches, and we have high hopes, all mixed together. So let's start with the high hopes, and they begin with this number, 11.19%. Wow, that is a seriously impressive figure. That's the rate that Tamil Nadu's economy grew. It's the highest in the entire country. To put that in perspective, they're now talking about their goal of becoming a $1 trillion economy as being well within reach. And the really interesting part is that it's being seen as a win for their specific model. This idea of pairing aggressive pro-business growth with a strong focus on social justice. So this is a huge, powerful sign of momentum. But, and this is the key thing we have to remember for this whole explainer, a single headline never tells the full story. And this good economic news wasn't just happening in one corner of the country. Not at all. This positive vibe was national. India's entire services sector, and you have to think about just how enormous that is. It covers everything from the high-tech IT geniuses in Bengaluru and Hyderabad, to the tourism and hospitality industries, to retail, to banking, basically a huge chunk of the workforce. Well, that entire sector just hit an 11-month high. So the engine room of the Indian economy isn't just sputtering along, it is roaring. It's showing real, genuine strength and a whole lot of resilience. Okay, so this is where the plot thickens. Let's just recap for a second. We have a major state economy that is absolutely on fire. We have the country's biggest employment sector hitting a new high. And on top of all that, inflation is pretty low. Now, if you're the Reserve Bank of India, the central bank, you're looking at all this and thinking, this is perfect. This is our chance to cut interest rates, make it cheaper for businesses to borrow money to expand, and for people to buy homes and cars. Let's pour a little fuel on this fire and keep this amazing growth going. It seems like an absolute no-brainer, right? But that's not what they did. They got nervous. They hit the pause button. So the big question, the million-dollar question, is why? With all this incredibly positive news, what could possibly have been lurking in the shadows that made them so worried? And here is our answer. The headache that ruined the picnic. It's a classic case of geopolitics crashing the economic party. The plan was simple. It was logical. The economy is strong. Let's give it a boost. But then the problem arrived, and it came from Washington, D.C. The United States government suddenly slapped a massive 50% total tariff on Indian imports. That is a huge, punitive number. And the reason they gave? Because India has continued to buy large amounts of discounted crude oil from Russia. And just like that, with one move, so much uncertainty was injected into the system that India's central bank felt it had no choice but to slam the brakes on its plans. And this chart really shows you why they got so nervous. This isn't just a small slap on the wrist. Let's look at the real numbers. India's annual exports to the US are worth about $86.5 billion. This new tariff puts nearly $47 billion of that at immediate risk. We're talking about more than half of the trade being threatened overnight. This is where abstract foreign policy stuff becomes very, very real. This isn't just a number in a government report. It threatens the jobs of people working in textile mills and leather goods factories, in the jewelry and gem sector. These are major employment industries. Now, let's be clear, the US goal probably isn't to completely cripple the Indian economy, but it is absolutely an attempt to twist its arm, and to twist it hard. It's a very strong message.
So, that tariff, it's really important to understand that it wasn't just a random act of economic policy. Not even close. It was a very deliberate, very calculated move in a much, much bigger game. So now we have to do what the central bank did. We have to zoom out from the economy and look at the entire global chessboard, because that's where the real high-stakes drama is unfolding.
And this diplomatic maneuvering it's incredibly complex, almost like a three-dimensional chess game. Let's break it down. Step 1. The US makes its move. It uses its economic power, these tariffs, as a bargaining chip to pressure India into distancing itself from Russia. Okay, a classic power play. But then, step 2, India's response. Does it back down? Does it comply? Absolutely not. It does the complete opposite. It doubles down. It responds by signing a new strategic partnership pact with Moscow. It's a bold, defiant countermove. But then, here's the twist in step 3 that makes it all so fascinating. At the exact same time all this is happening, the US itself is holding what it calls productive talks with Russia about finding a way to peace in Ukraine. It's this complicated web of public pressure, back-channel talks, and hidden agendas. And as one of the sources we looked at put it so perfectly, this is classic diplomatic chess. When the US made its move with the tariff, India was faced with a choice. It could have taken the safe option, maybe made some quiet concessions, but it didn't. It chose what the source calls a much riskier maneuver. It decided to lean in even harder to its relationship with Russia. This isn't just India reacting to pressure. This is India making a very loud, very clear statement that it is betting on a truly independent foreign policy, and it's willing to take big risks to maintain it. And it's so crucial to remember that none of this is happening in a vacuum. You have to look at the context of the entire world stage, which is shifting under our feet. On this very same day, look what else is going on. In Poland, a new president backed by Donald Trump is sworn in, signaling a rise in nationalism in Europe. You have a corporate titan like Apple pledging $100 billion to US manufacturing, a clear move to align itself with political wins in Washington. And bubbling under the surface is the constant talk of a potential summit between Trump and Putin, a meeting that could completely reshape global alliances. The whole board is in motion, and every player, from nations to corporations, is trying to figure out where to stand. Okay, so we've established the intense pressure coming from the outside, both on the economy and on the world stage. It's a lot to deal with. So the natural next question is, how is India responding to all of this internally? How is it trying to strengthen itself from the inside out to be able to withstand these pressures? Well, if we look closely at the day's other headlines, we find some really fascinating answers. The first and maybe most direct response to external pressure is to get tough. And that's what this number represents. 67,000 crore rupees. That is a massive chunk of change. It's the value of a huge military procurement deal that India's Defense Council just approved. In simple terms, India is on a long-term military shopping spree to seriously beef up its capabilities along its borders. In a tough neighborhood and on a volatile global stage, the government is sending a very clear message. We are building a credible deterrent. But some of the most intense pressures aren't geopolitical. They're coming from nature itself. There was a terrible, tragic disaster in the Himalayas, in a place called Uttarkashi. At first, reports called it a cloudburst, a random freak weather event. But now experts suspect it was actually something called a GLOF. It stands for Glacial Lake Outburst Flood, and it's a direct consequence of climate change. As glaciers melt at an alarming rate, they form these large, unstable lakes behind natural dams of ice and rock. When those dams break, they release a catastrophic flood. Calling it a GLOF isn't just a technicality. It completely reframes the event. It's no longer a random act of God. It's a predictable, if tragic, symptom of a warming planet. And it demands a whole new way of thinking about safety and development in these fragile mountain regions. So while India is reacting to these external and natural threats, it's also clear that there's a major push to proactively build for the future. You can't just play defense. And we see two very different but equally interesting approaches to this. In the state of Rajasthan, they're making a huge bet on the future of technology.
They've unveiled these ambitious new policies for artificial intelligence and other tech, with the stated goal of turning a desert state into a digital oasis. Meanwhile, in the capital, Delhi, they're taking a more subtractive approach. They're trying to get government out of the way of business by slashing red tape, like completely eliminating the need for factory licenses for many types of businesses. Two very different tactics, but they're both aimed at the same goal: clearing the path for growth and innovation.
Sometimes the change is so big that you need a symbol for it, something physical that everyone can see. And on this day, we got one. The Prime Minister inaugurated Kartavya Bhavan, which is this massive, brand new government office complex. But this is so much more than just a new building with desks and chairs. It is a physical manifestation of an entire ideology. It's a very self-conscious attempt to decolonize the government's workspace, moving away from the old British-built buildings of the Raj, and to create an architectural symbol for what they call a new India.
But, and this is honestly the funniest story of the day, this grand modern vision immediately collided with a very stubborn reality. See, the interior of the building was designed with this super trendy, open-plan office layout. Like a tech startup in Silicon Valley, with no cubicle walls to encourage collaboration. Well, the old-school government officials who had to move in were not amused. They actually filed formal complaints, basically saying, "This is absurd. How are we supposed to work on confidential files or have sensitive discussions about national security when our colleagues can hear every word we say?" It's this perfect, hilarious culture clash. It's the 21st century startup aesthetic meeting 20th century bureaucratic reality. And it's a great little reminder that changing mindsets and work cultures is a whole lot harder than just constructing a new building.
Okay, so we've looked at the economy and its unexpected headwinds. We've navigated the tricky waters of geopolitics. We've seen how India is responding to pressures by building up its defenses and reforming from within. We have all the pieces of the puzzle on the table. So now, for the final and most important part, let's step back and connect all these threads to see what the big picture really looks like.
And when you lay it all out like this, suddenly it all clicks into place. What looked like a totally random list of headlines at the beginning of the day actually forms a remarkably clear and coherent narrative. It is a story of pressure and response. As this table shows, you have external pressure on the economic front from those US tariffs. And India's response is twofold. It's cautious, with the central bank hitting pause, but it's also resilient, with the services sector booming anyway. Then you have geopolitical pressure, again from the US. The response there, it's assertive and independent, strengthening ties with Russia and boosting its own defense. And finally, you have the internal pressures, from climate change and old-fashioned bureaucracy. And the response there is to reform and rebuild with new tech policies, deregulation, and even new symbolic buildings. This isn't chaos. This is a nation in motion, actively navigating a world of challenges from every single direction.
And all of this, all these interconnected stories from just one single day, leaves us with one final big question. It's a question not just for India, but for any country, really. In a world that is in a constant state of flux, where the ground is always shifting beneath your feet, when you have immense pressure mounting from the outside and incredibly complex challenges piling up at home, how do you do it? How does a nation define its own path forward? How does it decide what it stands for and where it's going? That, at the end of the day, is the real story hiding behind all of the headlines.
If you found this breakdown helpful and you enjoy connecting the dots to see the bigger picture, then make sure you follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. And if you have a friend or family member who finds the daily news a bit overwhelming, please share this with them. Thanks so much for tuning in.